I'm alive, Chair.
Good morning, members, officers and viewers. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. It is being conducted as a hybrid meeting in accordance with the remote meetings protocol and the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to make democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. For those attending remotely, I would remind you that this meeting is being streamed live to the public, so can I remind you to switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking to the meeting to help to improve the quality of the recording. Can I also ask remote members to switch on their chat function and use this when they wish to speak. Please do not speak until I invite you, and remember to switch off on your camera and mic. As this is a relatively small meeting, online voting may be required together with a vote of members present in the chamber. So before I declare a vote, I will ensure that all members' votes are collated. As well as being broadcast live, a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the Council website for public viewing and training within the Council. A Welsh translation of this meeting can be provided upon request. So moving on, do we have any apologies?
2 apologies today, Chair, from Councillor Baker Westhead and Councillor Bright.
Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting then, please. Can someone move them as a reasonable record?
Move, Chair.
Seconded. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Go through them for any points arising. Page 3. No. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. No matters arising. Thank you very much. Moving forward now then, please. Annual digital report. And Mr. Blizzard is going to present on this, I think. Or Tracy, are you leading?
Shall I introduce the Chair? And I'll introduce us first. I'm Tracy McKim, Head of People Policy and Transformation, and my colleague Mark Blizzard will take us through the detail of the report. We've also got 3 colleagues online with us today to support us on any detail, and the Cabinet member, Dimitri Petruni, is listening in, particularly for the digital strategy themes, because this will become his report to sign off on the annual report. This is a non-statutory report that in Newport we started to deliver because we do a lot of digital work. We have a digital strategy and there was no place for that to be reported. So for the last 2 or 3 years we've had an annual report which reflects all of the digital work. And as I say, it goes through Cabinet member for its final approval. What it attempts to do is set out what we've achieved during the year with our partners, the SRS IT service, and how that links to the previous digital strategy. That strategy is quite old now and we'll be having a new one, so the form of this report will change next year once we have a new strategy in place in line with that. So the detail of the report starts on page 13, and Mark will talk us through the headlines within that, and then we'll pause for any questions, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Yes, so as Tracy mentioned, it's not a statutory report that we need to do. It's something we feel is good practice. So it's also to try and recognise the kind of importance digital plays within the organisation, and especially since the pandemic started, you know, how we rely on it. So all I'm going to do is talk a little bit through the kind of executive summary really, and just pick out some highlights from that. So as Tracy's mentioned already, the new digital strategy is being developed, and that's an important plan for the organisation, and it will be linked to the corporate plan that is also being developed. It will probably just come slightly later than the corporate plan due to the importance of the corporate plan. So in terms of the kind of governance and the organisation that we deal in, the The shared resource service has been mentioned already. This report is not exclusively about the work we do with them. There is some other work that we do that is outside the SRS, but obviously they're a key partner with us in terms of our service delivery, and we do see that very much as a partnership rather than a sort of client-contractor type arrangement. Over the last few years, as mentioned in the funding section, additional funding has been provided to digital services in various things to improve things like laptop provision, cyber security, doing some more innovative work and so forth. So additional funding in the team has also helped in terms of capacity for the digital team. So some of the work we've done, we wouldn't have been able to do without that increased capacity and capability, including the local broadband fund that we mentioned there. Just turning on to the SRS performance. So they report on 4 performance indicators, and of those 3 are green, so 3 are meeting the targets. The main one, the primary one, which is in relation to service against SLA, service level agreement, in terms of calls responded to, etc., is being consistently above target for the last few years. Things have improved. We've been in the SRS for sort of 5.5 years now, and we have made steady improvements during that time in collaboration with them. In terms of some of the projects during 21-22, so procurement of a new finance system, which is starting to be implemented now, is a key project for the organisation, and a really important one. Involves a lot of people, and a lot of time and effort is going into that. In terms of some of the other projects that took place last year, so Microsoft 365 development, including things like Teams and the meter room facilities, have been developed. And it's quite fitting in a sense that we're in the council chamber today, because the funding we received from a local democracy fund has enabled the infrastructure in this room to be updated and refreshed, and hopefully provide a kind of more modern sort of facility for meetings such as this. In terms of other highlights, there's a major project that has commenced to migrate our data centre. So we have some fairly old infrastructure in this building that is being migrated to new infrastructure in what's called the Vantage Data Centre, which is in Newport. And we're also making proactive move of systems to the cloud. So 4 major systems were moved to the cloud. We anticipate that's going to give us increased sort of support, availability, resilience, and we are making very much a more proactive move to the cloud now. In terms of kind of some other highlights, we mentioned about a digital democracy fund, but there's also a local broadband fund where we've received £210,000 worth of Welsh Government funding. That is to provide infrastructure for the 3 adult care homes in Newport, and to enable some of the technologies, the more modern technologies that currently are kind of problematic. So that's been a very important project, and we're in the process now where we're looking to procure a provider for that solution. Just a reminder that we do provide public Wi-Fi in about 50 council and community buildings and in the city centre, and as well as that we provide it in buses as well. So I think the pandemic has highlighted the digital inclusion piece, and the initial work we've done on the digital strategy has highlighted that digital inclusion is important. People want to use technology, but not everybody wants to use new technology, and we can't leave those people behind. So we do provide public Wi-Fi to facilitate that kind of digital inclusion piece. The final piece I'll mention in here it's not a question of priority, but this is a newer initiative, is in relation to climate change. So there are a number of initiatives in terms of the digital part of climate change. So even in terms of this meeting today, there are people who previously would have attended this meeting in person and their kind of carbon footprint in doing so. And this facility is enabling that. And there's a lot of things that digital can do in that. You know, there's things in terms of power management, there's things about moving to the cloud and more efficient cooling systems that all these systems need. So climate change, although it's the bottom of this list, is very much not the bottom of the list in terms of priority. So that's kind of me taking you through the kind of executive summary of the report, and obviously more than happy to answer any questions in relation to anything in relation to what's included in the report, both looking back and obviously the action plan for 22-23 as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. Can I commend you for the very clear report and draw members' attention to the executive summary at the front, but more importantly, the action plan at the back, which gives the answer to a lot of the questions that members may have thought to ask. Members, I don't know how you want to tackle this because it's broken down into four clear sections. So would we go through them one by one and do it that way?
I'd prefer to just go through the report and people's questions.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Right, so I think Mick Dadd's got the first question. Councillor Al-Nawami.
Yeah, thank you. It's on the executive summary, Mark. So, looking at the, the major project led by SRS for the migration to new data center, is that the one you said in Newport? Is that the one where the LG building? Is that where it is?
Yes, Councillor. It's formerly known as Next Generation Data Center, which, as you said, was the former LG factory. It's now renamed as Vantage. So yes, indeed, it is in Newport. Okay,
and that presumably catered for a lot more than just us, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a data center for a lot of things, yeah?
Absolutely, and there's there's various kind of Microsoft solutions that are delivered from there. It's huge. It's one of the biggest in Europe, I believe.
And the other comment you make there about the 4 major systems migrated to the cloud, how secure is that, Mark? I mean, what are these 4 major systems, and do we have cause to worry about the security of the data there?
Good question, thank you. So I think the short answer is no, but obviously the data is still a responsibility of the council, so we have to kind of go through a due diligence process. So whenever we are moving a system to the cloud, we will ask various questions of that supplier in terms of security requirements. So most of them would have an international standard called ISO 27001, which is Information Security Management Standards. They will have to have kind of penetration tests and the like taken place. And again, in terms of places like Vantage and so forth, then there's the physical security element and the vetting of staff, all those kind of things. These organisations need to provide assurances on. And just as an example, that the WCCIS system that is provided across Wales is a cloud-hosted system. So again, whilst I appreciate totally the question of that data being in the cloud, then these providers are well versed on the kind of security measures they need to protect the data that ultimately belongs to us and our citizens.
Okay, thank you for that. The point I think you touched on, and actually I highlighted it as a question before you mentioned it, the climate change. You said it was not sort of a priority. It's at the bottom of the list, that sort of thing. I was going to ask you really just to elaborate on the sort of project that the digital team and SRS are looking there in that. I mean, you mentioned a meeting, saving a little bit on the carbon footprint and all that. But, what sort of areas have been identified to actually sort of take us towards the agenda. I mean, we as a council have passed an emergency motion, if you remember. So I was surprised to say that that was not a priority, because I would have felt that is a priority.
Sorry, Chair. So he didn't say that.
Yeah.
He said it was a priority. As a point of information.
Well, I thought he mentioned about the bottom of the list. No, sorry?
Yeah, he mentioned it was at the bottom of the list and then went on to say that although it's at the bottom of the list, it's very much higher up the priority list.
Yeah, but isn't there contradiction in terms there?
I don't think there was a contradiction in meaning. There may have been a contradiction in the actual wording.
Well, can I ask Mark, please, if you can just elaborate on the kind of areas?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll come in first.
Okay.
Yeah, it is placed at the bottom of the executive summary, and we could actually move it up, couldn't we? But it is very much a priority. So just to say, there's also a climate change strategy for the authority that's been signed off. And in that strategy, it talks very much about IT actions, which include kind of behavioural changes, as Mark has talked a little bit about, so people being at home, encouraging active travel through the use of technology. But we also need to focus on the energy efficiency of our systems, being sure that we're not increasing climate change problems by changing systems. So when we move to the cloud, what systems do we stop using? Are we using the most efficient technology? When we procure new systems, is there a clause in there about procuring the most efficient technology from a climate change point of view? Those questions are posed in the climate change strategy, and there'll be an annual report on that. And this kind of dovetails into that and talks about the digital action. So just to reinforce the importance of climate change. And Mark, do you want to give a few examples of the climate change digital work?
Yeah, apologies, Chair. Apologies, members, in terms of I obviously didn't articulate that very well. Apologies. I was saying, although it was the bottom of the list, it was a priority, so apologies on that.
Mark, I realise that now. I think you meant physically at the bottom of the list.
Okay.
Yeah, I realise really that I sort of took it literally, really,
No,
but there we are.
That's my apologies on that. So as Tracy mentioned, it's very much joined up with the wider climate change piece, but there are important digital elements to that. So as Tracy's mentioned, this is part of the draft of the digital strategy. It recognised the importance of technology in the climate change agenda. Like I said, as an example of it today, we've had times when physically people were not allowed to be in particular places, and technology has enabled us to do things. But in terms of that climate change, the other thing is obviously to encourage people to go to physical meetings where it is necessary, and I believe there's a place for that, but there's also a place for technology to kind of get people together and so forth. Some of the other things we mentioned, so because of the scale of things like the Vantage data centre, the cooling there is on that kind of scale, and although the cooling requirements are large for the whole piece, the proportion that we have and the economies of scale because of that large scale mean that it proportionately is less heavy on carbon use. So moving to something which seemingly is very big and you think it's huge, but because of the scale of it and the breadth of it, then it actually reduces that. And similarly, when it comes to kind of our moves of systems to the cloud, because we haven't got, for instance, 2 computer rooms in Newport, 2 computer rooms in Blaen y Gwent, 2 computer rooms in Torfaen, whatever. What we're actually doing is we are maximising the use of these kind of big scale data centres that are scaled accordingly and have the cooling appropriately as well. Some other things are we are trialling technologies that enable us to gather information about climate change. So we've kind of been piloting some work in terms of kind of air quality, some initial work on that. There's more work that we can potentially do in terms of things like flood sensors and so forth. So as well as making a positive contribution in terms of reducing travel, we're also in a position where we can actually gather data that otherwise that we wouldn't have, and the potential for sort of cause and effect identification. Another thing is to minimise the amount of data we store, which is quite a challenge in an organisation. But we shouldn't keep information for longer than we need it. Obviously, all that infrastructure uses up energy, so we want to reduce the amount of storage we use. And the other things are in terms of the kind of normal kind of reuse and recycle type stuff, which is basically the the end of life of a laptop or other devices, and kind of being recycled to the community and so forth. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that as a result of the work the council is doing corporately, this is taking a higher priority in digital, because I think it's taken a higher priority everywhere for everybody. So yes, those are the kind of measures.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you. That was very detailed. Yeah.
Councillor James, I note you want to speak. Was it on this particular issue, or is it the one you indicated earlier?
It was I indicated two earlier, and I've got some questions on those. I do have some questions on climate change, but none that have been touched on yet.
Yeah, okay. Are you happy to take the climate change questions now?
Yeah, more than happy. Can you see me? Because I can't see myself on it. Oh, I know what I've done. There we go.
You coming in after this, Matthew.
So earlier on, you noted that having virtual meetings like this is saving carbon, and you're right. I'm just wondering how the council calculates how much carbon it saves.
So thank you, good question. This is probably more in the climate change strategy, and in the climate change strategy and the action plan within that, we are currently developing measures for a range of things, which include whether buildings are still being heated to the same level because people are travelling, how people are travelling, the active travel ladder. Because it doesn't follow that we're saving energy for everyone, does it? If you're walking in and you weren't going to heat your house, there are some trade-offs with that, so it is complex. But that is calculated, or attempts are being made to calculate as far as possible in the climate change strategy. We also have the local area energy plan. We're one of the first councils in Wales to have one of those that's been signed off. And we would dovetail into that, because digital is a part of that, but not the whole of it.
Yeah, great. And I'm glad you touched on the energy plan, because my next question is about energy, and it may be that you're not the person to answer, but let me know if that's the case. So we're talking about the data centres and more efficient cooling and everything, but all of that requires power. And I'm just wondering if you had knowledge of how the power for all of that is being generated right now. What's the energy mix?
I don't know the exact details in relation to Vantage, and we can come back to you on that specifically. But I understand that it has certain kind of accreditations in relation to the sort of climate agenda. So I can't tell you specifically what that is, but I know the SRS have asked that question of Vantage Data Centre, and they have the details. But I wouldn't want to quote that now.
Okay, thank you. That's everything on climate change. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, just some general comments about the report, Chair. I'm impressed of the progress we've made over the last couple of years since COVID. We have gone leaps and bounds, and the amount of work which has gone into ensuring this has happened, I think we need to recognise that and thank people for doing it. I like the executive summary. Some general IT issues I'll probably come back into on the next report when it comes to about logging on to book a trip to the tip or something like that. The one thing I'm concerned about is, and it comes into performance management, is about the length of time it takes to answer calls with SRS. And I appreciate that's on amber at the moment, but one of the action plan things there suggesting that more people promote self-service logging on. Now I'm a bit concerned about that, because if I've got problems with my IT, I wouldn't be able to log on in the first place, and I think we'd be spending more time trying to, staff as well, trying to do that and explain the situation, rather than phoning somebody up and saying, take over this, here's some of the problems. And that could actually take up more time from not just councillors but staff as well, if they have to try and log on first. And I noticed that's on the action plan, so one potential concern I have.
If you're okay for me to respond on that, Chair. Very good point, and it does pick up on the work of the digital strategy as well, in the sense that element of choice, Councillor, absolutely. And essentially what we are looking to do, I guess it's a theme within the digital piece as well, is to promote the kind of digital channel where it works, make it better, encourage people to use that. And if people in their normal lives use technology in many cases, and it needs to be easier, but it shouldn't replace. So in that sense, it would be very much an encouragement, and again, we would be looking for that solution in terms of self-service to ensure that it works well enough for it to be seen as beneficial. And if it doesn't, then the phones will obviously continue to be there. And as you mentioned, in terms of if you can't log on to systems, then essentially the phone is going to be your only option. The other thing just to touch on in relation to that is that the SRS are looking with us at a kind of a password reset tool. So that would enable people to set up certain questions, like you probably do on various other websites, that if you have a problem with your password, that you can reset that. The new technology we use in terms of the always-on VPN solution for remote access actually enables that, whereas the older solution wouldn't have enabled us to do that. So that should be a positive development. But absolutely, the phones need to remain an option.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
Can I just follow on? That's really helpful to mention, though, because there's a number of boards and escalation points that we meet with SRS on, and we can now raise that Scrutiny have endorsed our view that we need to do more. And I don't want to ignore the Councillor's comment about the brilliant work of the last year. I feel a bit of a fraud. I wasn't responsible for the service for most of it, and it really is an impressive report and accomplishment, and there's a number of members of staff on the call, so it's important to note that. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Al-Muami made earlier, the protection of the data. Obviously, we're exporting the actual management of the data, but the responsibility for protecting the data still remains with the Council. Obviously, I welcome the elimination of the double backup servers and things like that within Council buildings, and I'm sure they'll be much more secure then. So what checks have you got on data and data losses and all the other things you need to comply with under the GDPR regulations?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just similar to a previous question, it remains our data, as you're kind of mentioning, and the responsibility lies with us. Essentially, when we go through this process, we need to ensure that those solutions meet our needs on a technical basis. Like I said, they need to have certain standards, and we will request details of those standards. The other thing we do is something called the Data Protection Impact Assessment when we move to these services, basically, which looks at the protections we need to put in place to make sure that we are satisfied that those solutions are safe. As a general thing, these these solutions are provided to multiple customers. So obviously it's not just a Newport solution. These cloud solutions are designed to host the data for customers, and the numbers are going up and up. So there is some safety in that kind of numbers piece, if you like, in terms of essentially these companies are, you know, it's critical they provide those services securely, and essentially they need to put the investment in according to that. So they are doing that. Absolutely right. We need to go through that due diligence process, and that's the process we go through. We feel that it does what we need it to do, but we will keep that under review to make sure that we are, you know, keeping up to date with standards and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James, did you want to come in again?
Yes, please. I'd like to come in on the call response time and a little bit on customer satisfaction as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that one, but have we finished with this item now on data, data protection, so as we can move forward smoothly? Okay, so we're off to customer satisfaction now then, yeah?
Okay, great. On customer satisfaction, the first thing I noticed is that you give a percentage of satisfaction from the people who responded, I'm assuming, to your survey, but you don't give the number. So it's quite hard for me to tell 93%, is it 93% of 100 respondents? So I'm just wondering if you had those numbers for us.
Yes, good question. And in hindsight, that probably could have been included because, as you say, it adds some kind of weight to it. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we do have them. Just to kind of give you a little bit more confidence, I think they were previously, and this is part of the SRS kind of process, it was a percentage of calls that people were asked for the customer satisfaction kind of opinion. It's now on all calls, so all calls that are, but just to be clear, that doesn't mean that the customer necessarily gives their feedback, but they're given the opportunity to feedback on all calls now. So yeah, we can add that to a later version of the report.
Yep, that would be fantastic. Thank you. There's also a huge variance in the monthly satisfaction percentages. You say 60% in 1 month, up to a high of 93%. I was just wondering if you had any insight for us as to why the variance.
Another good question. The short answer is no in terms of those particular monthly variances. SRS do kind of probably review it more actively than we do kind of as a council. We do have kind of monthly, what SRS call delivery group meetings, where they go through performance with us. They would generally tell us during those meetings about specific issues, maybe during a month that might have impacted on that. We can do more analysis of that. Anecdotally, it would be, when things go wrong that have a big effect on the wider organisation. But yes, we can do some more analysis on that.
Okay, thank you. On the call response times, what would you say first are the challenges?
SRS would be able to answer this better than myself personally, but in terms of the general challenges, there's some recruitment and retention challenges that the SRS have kind of highlighted to their SRS strategic board in terms of kind of recruitment and retention of staff.
Excuse me, Mark. If you don't feel you can answer a question, it's perfectly acceptable to say you'll get back to us. We don't.
Absolutely.
Put you on the rack.
Yeah, no. I'll provide a kind of my interpretation if that's okay. So that's part of the reason. Because we work with SRS, we haven't necessarily got the day-to-day operational kind of understanding, but we have the kind of the overall understanding. So that's kind of one of the challenges. The other challenge is that the service desk is usually the route from the sort of bottom of the organisation further up the organisation. So when people do well on the service desk, they will tend to get promoted, and that causes that bit of a a cycle of trying to fill those roles. So that, I think that's part of the reason. But yeah, we can do some more analysis too.
Tracy, yeah.
Perfect.
Sorry,
I
Councillor.
noted.
Could I just add?
Sorry.
Sorry, could I just add to that? There is an inherent tension between calls resolved at first point of contact and response times. So if it isn't our service now, but obviously we previously ran it. So if you're trying to resolve all calls at first point of contact, you end up spending longer on the phone rather than just sifting people through. And often you see those two metrics slightly in conflict of one another. And it is our preference that calls are resolved at first point of contact. We don't, most customers don't want to call back. They want it resolved there and then. So I think that those metrics have an inherent tension, actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
Lauren, come back.
That's completely understandable. I can't remember seeing. Is there a figure for how many were resolved? How many calls were resolved at the first point of contact for us?
Again, we've got those figures, but we haven't included the raw figures. Sorry, we just provide percentages, but again, we can add those in.
Thank you. On the averages, so you didn't give us an average for this time, which is understandable. You're in between systems, but further in that section, you say it's comparable to the previous years. So I'm just wondering how you know that and why you didn't give averages for each system before combining.
Again, that's another fair point. We could do that. To be honest, when we've been drafting this, we've been going back and forward with SRS in terms of the figures, so we probably need to reflect that. What I was attempting to do in the absence of having those exact figures was to say that it has been a struggle over previous years, and as Tracy's also mentioned, in terms of the trying to solve calls at first point of contact, and that sort of conflict in inverted commas between those things. So I think in terms of the themes and the challenges remain, and that's kind of what I was alluding to there.
Okay, thank you. Overall, it is a good report, and I feel like I've asked a lot of questions, but overall, I am pleased. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions that relating to the subjects we've been? No. A couple of the things in the report we haven't really touched on. It's the city centre Wi-Fi and the extent of it. I think perhaps a map or some sort of drawing would have been helpful for the report, so we can see exactly where it's going for the benefit of our citizens as much as anything. And the other part that seems to have been not questioned is the robotic process automation. That's a very fancy title, but this is the one that will probably have most effect on our citizens and our staff over the next 10 years, as it tends to eliminate jobs.
Thank you, Chair. It's good points about the level of detail in the report from yourself and the previous councillor there. What we're trying to do is get a sense of a strong public report that talks about the whole year without all the detail, but without losing some of the granularity. So there are some challenges in getting that right. On RPA specifically, super excited. We're one of the first local authorities to use this particular technology. Our aim is to use it for tasks that are challenging and we don't have the resource to do. It can be used to sort of cut into services. We've seen that elsewhere. But actually, the council's automated quite a lot of its processes already. So 2 examples that we've used that for are introducing email archive, which was something that was way over time, needed to be done, but was a repetitive action that needed to be repeated over and over. We used it for that. And the recent cost of living payments that were being made to residents, this was a new requirement. It didn't have a process. It didn't have members of staff ready to do that. So we were able to come in with that technology and support. And over time, we hope to work with colleagues across the council to automate as much as possible, really to release staff, I would say, to do more person-centred activities, you know, answering the phone or talking to people or whatever that looks like. But it's a really exciting piece of technology. Anything to add?
Yes, a very good question, and Tracy's kind of very much highlighted the kind of benefits, but as she's also mentioned, it's the repetitive work that we're trying to remove, and it's not about trying to remove people. Just to be clear, it's about trying to free up time, and that's essentially what's happened. So, in terms of the cost of living payments, for instance, I think they were taking to do. I think the figures they quoted was to do 40 applications would take about an hour. Essentially, now they put a file into a folder and it will process 1,000, and that frees up time to do the more complicated bits, the bits where the matches don't happen and further follow-up is required. So yeah, it's very much designed to complement, and the phrase that's been used is to take the robot out of the human. That's the kind of that's the sort of strapline that's promoted with this type of technology.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, did you indicate you wanted to speak? Your camera came on.
Sorry, Chair, no, I had a problem with my internet, so I had to leave and come back in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Al-Nawami, then, please.
Yeah, I'm sort of just following on the question about the city centre access to Wi-Fi, digital inclusion. I mean, to be clear, really, you don't access Wi-Fi everywhere in the city centre, is it? It's only available in certain buildings, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. It's, for instance, it doesn't extend to Friars Walk specifically because there's separate Wi-Fi there. It's a particular end of the city, this kind of end of the city largely. It doesn't really go over the bridge to speak of in that sense. And there is discussion about whether that could and should be widened, but obviously there's a cost associated with that to be considered. But yes, it only covers part of the city centre.
I struggled really even to get that, in this sort of this side of the bridge. I had an issue with my own provider back in May, during the election period. And when I was trying to access any public Wi-Fi, all I got was your connection is not private, so I couldn't even get on anything that was from us at all. And I did think, that actually we do need to. I don't know what other cities do really. You mentioned cost, and I appreciate that, but it would be good, to widen digital inclusion, to be able to access Wi-Fi, at least in the core of the city centre, which have actually, I failed to get it by the Newport Centre, for example.
Yeah, and that kind of leads on, obviously we're not on that item yet, but when we talk about the digital strategy, we are talking about the aspirations of the council and the city. And some of that needs an investment in terms of time and commitment, and obviously at certain points some budgets. So those are things that I think need to be considered, and obviously we welcome your feedback in terms of the value of that to the kind of citizens of Newport.
Yeah, when you say then, is it only time management rather than infrastructure, Mark?
It's always a little bit about the wider resource, but primarily I think it would be at this point it would be about cost, and there are some discussions around that, but the amounts of money. So, for instance, we pay about £170,000 a year for our kind of public Wi-Fi provision in our kind of 50 establishments where we have it. So we were considering there was a budget proposal to reduce that previously, but because of the impact of the pandemic, we have kind of gone back on that proposal because of the digital inclusion and the importance of that. But there are considerations about making that wider.
Yeah, and I suppose as we've been successful with getting some grants for some of the projects you mentioned in the report, perhaps that is an area we could sort of give some attention to.
Yes, there are various funding streams, and I mentioned about the local broadband fund, which has been targeted at a different area, but there are opportunities in that area, and we do try and take those opportunities where we can. There's usually parameters around what is and isn't appropriate, but yes, again, with the additional kind of 2 members of the staff in digital team, we are in a position to look at those things that we would have struggled to have the capacity for before.
Okay, thank you.
Before we draw this part of the meeting to a close, we've got Councillor Bartolotti with us and Councillor Laura Lacey. So I don't know if they've got any comments they'd like to make.
Chair, I'm not sure it's necessarily appropriate. They're listening to they're observers, not
Okay.
they've been invited to.
As you wish. Thank you. So at that point then we'll move on to the next part of the meeting, which is the developing themes 22 to 27. Again, Mark, are you going to...
So one of our colleagues online is just going to put a presentation on the screen, if that's okay, and we'll take you through the themes. Thanks very much, whoever that is. So quick reminder, this is the forward look for the coming years, and Mark will talk a little bit about what's underneath those themes and where this is part of the consultation for that forming strategy.
Apologies, sorry, I'll say that again. I didn't have my microphone on. Just to explain, one of my colleagues has put the presentation up on screen. If we move to the next slide, I'll talk you through the kind of what we're going to cover today. So I'll do a bit of introduction in terms of what the digital strategy is about, the previous one, etc. I'll tell you a little bit about the progress to date. I'll then talk about the kind of draft themes, but I think the underlying thing I want to get over today, similar to the annual digital report, is we very much want your feedback and engagement and comments and suggestions. That's kind of really why we're here. We don't want to do this in isolation. It's very much not been a digital team thing. It's been a council thing led by the digital team. But in terms of this group is really important in terms of our engagement. So we welcome the feedback on that. So if we go on to the next slide. So the existing digital strategy technically expired in 2020. The pandemic has been such that we haven't reviewed it until this point. We've been busy doing the things that need to be done, but now's an opportunity to catch up on that. It has served as well. Most of the things that, we compared the new strategy to the old strategy, most of the things are still valid. Some things feel a little bit dated. Technology moves on, so it does need a refresh. As I mentioned, the pandemic has had a huge impact on technology, and it's really, I'm grateful for the feedback from Councillor Evans in terms of the developments over the last couple of years. I think, that's very much a collective effort, but, you know, again, it's a bit of a necessity as the mother of invention in that regard, because, you know, we just had to do things. So, yes, it has given us a different emphasis probably on technology and, you know, the speed that maybe that can be applied compared with maybe what it was previously. So in terms of the strategy in general, you know, it is set in that direction. Where do we want to be? How do we want to get there? We had some useful and really interesting discussions with our cabinet member Dimitri Petruni this morning, and we welcome the feedback and the engagement with that. And you know, collectively, I think there's some excitement about what we're trying to do. It will make commitments, so it will be setting things that we are looking to achieve. So there will be an action plan at the end. So, you know, we need to be comfortable that we have the kind of the necessary to deliver those commitments. And to a certain extent, that will be some resource in terms of budget. A lot of it will be about organisational commitment from officers and members in terms of the cultural change and you know, those aspirations. In normal times, it wouldn't be so closely aligned time-wise to the corporate plan, but circumstances have been such that the corporate plan is being developed now. That will take priority over the digital strategy in terms of importance. However, they are closely linked. It is an important strategy for the organisation over the next 5 years. So, as I mentioned, you know, we have put this together with various consultation and so forth, but really we are looking for feedback, and I'm encouraged by the feedback we've had on the digital report, and that's absolutely what we're looking for. Go to the next slide. So just in terms of what's happened so far, so external and internal engagement, this is part of the internal engagement, but there have been public surveys on the website, public Wi-Fi surveys that have been used to ask specific questions. We have done some paper surveys, again going back to the point about the element of choice for customers. We did a session at the Newport Managers Network, which is the kind of top 3 tiers of the offices within the organisation, and had some really useful feedback from that group. It kind of affirmed a number of the things that we'd added as some of the themes and some of the important aspects. It's been discussed this week at corporate management team. As I mentioned, only literally this morning we've had a conversation with our cabinet member in relation to the themes and again engagement and feedback on that, which is really encouraging. Again, just to reiterate, we are looking for feedback. Following the feedback, it will be taken to cabinet, and as I said, because of the timing, it's likely to follow the corporate plan slightly. So that's kind of where we've got to. What I'm going to now talk through, and we shared a document with a little bit more detail on this, but this is now the kind of themes that we have, and we're seeking kind of views on. So the first one we've entitled Digital Transformation. So we'll transform services by the innovative use of technology that is effective, easy to use, and designed around user needs. So that's the first theme. If we go on to the next slide, I'll talk you through a little bit of what we're trying to do in that. So transform services by the innovative use of digital technology. Again, we discussed with cabinet member this morning whether we are indeed innovative enough. I think there are certainly good elements of innovation that we've talked about a little bit this morning. So, for instance, the robotic process automation and other kind of initiatives kind of highlight that we are not sort of standing still, but there's more we can do, and we want to be more innovative as an organisation. We want those solutions to be easy to use for the members of the public and the citizens who use them. So, again, that's easier said than done. We need to make real efforts to work on that. Again, touching on the climate change, then we want to make a positive impact on climate change by the implementation of digital technologies. And obviously, we talked a bit more about that in terms of the annual digital report. So that's the first theme. Second theme is around digital skills and inclusion. So Just to mention, some of these themes are aligned to Welsh Government digital strategy themes. Some are our own. So, for instance, the Welsh Government have a digital skills theme and they have a digital inclusion theme. We felt it was appropriate to group those themes into one because they are so closely linked. So people's capability of using technology and the availability and affordability of that technology. So this theme is around developing the digital skills of our employees, citizens, members, and providing improved access to those technologies. So that's the kind of headline for the theme 2. On the next slide we have details of what we're looking to achieve. So again, to improve those digital skills, you know, there's a danger that people are left behind if they don't have access to these technologies and the skills to use those technologies. Sometimes you think, how would I have done that transaction if I wasn't kind of digitally enabled? You know, I had a doctor's appointment last week. I'm sending them a photo of my foot, and I was thinking to myself, if that was my mother-in-law or if that was my father, how would they cope with that kind of scenario? So that inclusion piece, that skills piece, is really important. And again, we've obviously touched upon the public Wi-Fi and the importance of that in terms of inclusion. So that is theme 2. Theme 3 actually is also a Welsh Government theme, so data and collaboration. So we'll improve service delivery by better use of data and increased collaboration, built on secure systems and processes. You know, we've seen during the pandemic we have to collaborate better. It's been a huge positive in terms of, you know, the use of data to drive decision making. I think we probably got off to a slightly rocky road in this, but latterly, you know, the development of the vaccines has obviously been driven by data and you know, scientists working together. And you know, the response that we've provided locally has been very much a joint effort between kind of national government, local government, other partners, and it's highlighted the importance of data in decision making and that collaborative piece. So in terms of the detail on the next slide, we have, you know, the need to share data appropriately, as I've mentioned in relation to the pandemic as an example, but you know, we're safeguarding children, etc. We need to share data appropriately. We need to make decisions based on data as well. That's always a challenge. Sometimes the data doesn't tell us what we always want to know, but you know, we do need to ensure that we use that data appropriately. And you know, we do include the kind of data protection piece in this theme, because it's all very well, you know, us having these aspirations, but in terms of protecting that data, you know, we need to make sure that we protect it, especially from cyber attacks, which is a fairly recent kind of escalation of those threats. So that's theme 3. Theme 4 is about digital infrastructure and connectivity. We've touched on this a little bit already. So this is the council and the city. So it's not just about the city, it's about the council and about the council's role in terms of stimulating the infrastructure in the city where we can. So we'll drive excellent digital infrastructure and connectivity for the city and for the council. On the next slide, I'll talk you through some of the things that we're looking at. So again, we have limited ability to stimulate the market when it comes to things like broadband, but the local full fibre networks bid that we led on behalf of Cardiff Capital Region was an example of that. The local broadband fund bid that we mentioned in the digital report is an opportunity to do that too. But there's also, as we've talked about, there's Wi-Fi in the city, there's mobile communications and 5G, you know, and where we can, we want to encourage those. There are some kind of horror stories about 5G that I think the industry reckon is unfounded, but those are the technologies that you know, we want to encourage where we can. So we want to increase inward investment in the city's infrastructure. You know, It's a very high-tech city in many ways. You know, we talked about Vantage Data Center. You know, that's one of the biggest data centers in Europe. There's a semiconductor cluster. You know, Newport is a very high-tech city, but, you know, there's more collectively we would like to do. So that's me taking you briefly through the themes. As I mentioned, I know a document was shared that provided some further information in terms of those themes, some of the things that we want to encourage in those themes, some of those things that we want to maybe be a bit bolder on, a bit more innovative on, but ultimately we're looking for the kind of organisational commitment to take this strategy forward and not to be a paper document that, you know, carries dust on a shelf. We want this to be an active thing. We plan to have some website content. Birmingham City Council has a digital strategy and has some useful web content, and, you know, that's the kind of model we'd like to follow in terms of, you know, not just being a PDF that's on the website, but to make it more interactive and updated. As you'll appreciate with any strategy, you know, there's going to be a focus more on the shorter term in things of action plans, because we don't know what's going to happen and how the environment's going to change over 5 years. So there will be more things that we identify in the early years of the strategy, but obviously we need to keep, you know, developing. Technology changes and we need to change with it. So in terms of the session today, so we're looking for feedback on the themes, the vision. You know, are we setting our targets too high? Are we setting our targets too low? You know, what members believe are the priorities for the city and for the council, the effect of the strategy, whether we need to share any further information with you to inform your thinking, and essentially anything else the committee feel is prudent. So that's as much as I want to say at this point. Thanks for listening, and we will, you know, take on board your engagement and feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd mentioned at pre-meeting, I think we could have potentially taken this with the previous report and added it, and we've already covered a number of the issues in there. I mean, the key words there are digital solutions that are effective and easy to use. What we don't know from this, we've got great admirable aims and objectives. What we don't know from this is what are the priorities, what are achievable in the shorter term, what are the long-term aims. And I appreciate that will get information from members of the public, from elected members, from staff and things like that. You know, a simple example, which I mentioned before, is about, I don't know whether now if you want to book to take your rubbish down to the refuse station, whether that's still working badly or whether that's been improved. But from a public perception, I know it used to cause a lot of problems with people trying to use the system. So simplifying systems, making it easier for people to log on is vitally important. Similarly with staff and training courses, trying to log on to e-learning. I know there's been a lot of issues about staff trying to, and if staff are spending their time trying to log on to systems which aren't working effectively, then it's not productive time for them or for anybody else. But yeah, I mean, the aims and objectives are admirable. I just want to know, when you've done your surveys, and you mentioned about online surveys and public surveys, what sort of number of people have you been in contact with? It might be useful to have an example of a survey, because sometimes I've seen council surveys which go on for far too long and people just don't do it. I mean, you know, if I was to do a survey online, if it says it's more than 5 minutes, then I won't bother doing it because it's just too long. So yeah, just some general comments. Interested in the feedback you've had from the public.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, we've been trying to strike the balance between providing a sort of suitable level of detail for kind of scrutiny, and you know, we, as was mentioned in the previous report, you know, we could have provided numbers in terms of the kind of the level of engagement and so forth. That's always a challenge, but we did have good feedback from the the public website survey. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it was certainly hundreds. We did strike a balance between some quite short surveys on bus Wi-Fi, which would have been 2 or 3 questions. So we can provide a summary of that, which may be useful to committee as well.
When we're talking about people who don't have the IT, I was trying to look up on the website because there was a question answered at council some time ago. I couldn't find it, unfortunately, but it related to, and I think the previous cabinet member, David Mayer, said that something like 24% of the city were not digitally competent. Is it that high? And
I know we had we actually specifically asked members of the public on their survey in terms of whether they felt their level of digital skills, and again we can kind of feed that back. I think it was less than that, certainly in terms of the number, but it is reducing, but there's a stubborn amount that will remain and kind of arguably will always remain, and as I said, we need to have alternatives for them that also work. Apologies, I didn't mention in the previous question in relation to that kind of customer usability and so forth. I think we recognise in this report the kind of importance of customer services as a function and as an activity, and again we need the organisation to buy into improvements in that, and as you said, some of the systems we have are not as user friendly as we would like, either as users or kind of citizens, if you like. So we will try and make improvements to that, and that sometimes is a challenge. But for instance, in terms of, just as an example, members may have seen some training we provided on passwords using a new solution we've implemented called Meta Compliance, and hopefully members would have found that easier to use than the kind of other system we use. Essentially, there's an ongoing challenge to improve our capabilities, and some of those things will be more difficult than others, but also a lot of it is a cultural thing, and essentially what equates to good enough. And I think culturally we need to be trying to raise that bar in what we feel is good enough in customer service, and try and improve that. I appreciate that's been challenging with the kind of budget situation, but nevertheless that is something we need to try and collectively improve.
Thank you.
On this point,
can I just add to that? I guess because it's easy to start to get into wanting to defend how far we've come, if you know what I mean. This is our forward look, and if you're saying those things are important, then that's important in our forward look, isn't it? So that's really helpful feedback. We're definitely committed as a council to reviewing the website as an example. I don't know about the tip example explicitly, but we're definitely committed to that. And I think you're endorsing that those things do need to be in those forward themes. I think that's the feedback. Yeah,
and I guess we also need to recognise there are, it's 20% of Newport population where face-to-face contact is still important.
And will always be.
And will always be. And sometimes for elderly people, the phone is their method.
Absolutely. And for actually, there's a recognition. I think the 24% is old, but it is still a chunk of people. There's also that piece that people move in and out of that number, because at times in your life or at times of specific things that you need to do, digital contact is not appropriate for every single thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Horton.
Sorry, I again reflect on some of the discussion and very much appreciate the engagement and the feedback, and as Tracy said, we don't want to feel like we're being defensive, because where there are challenges, we still need to try and address them. So just to make that point, sorry.
So for me, one of the things I use quite a lot, and I use the app quite a lot in my role as a councillor, and I very rarely use the website. So my question is, what or do you have the figures which show the proportion of people that are using the app for reporting things versus what sort of the websites are being used? And whichever one is, obviously the app, personally, I think the app is much easier, it's much more succinct to what you want to do. You can do it anywhere, and obviously you can pick up the free Wi-Fi, you can do it everywhere. So personally, I think we should be driving people to be using that sort of facility rather than turning on a computer, juicing up that, and obviously that adds a bit of carbon footprint as well. So do you have any sort of numbers which show the utilisation of one, the website, and then two, the app?
Thanks. Not with us. That will be part of the web project, though, for sure. You're making me feel slightly embarrassed that I always use the website, and I have paper in my hand, so I need to think about my own behaviour again. But that is really important, that we drive behaviour to the most efficient, and we need to think about things like the socioeconomic duty, where not everyone will have a computer, most people will have a mobile phone and the ability to use an app, so that from an inclusivity point of view, that's really important. We don't have the figures now, but that is part of the web development work. It's a good point.
Okay. Councillor James.
I think Councillor Horton has highlighted the app really well. I've actually previously had issues using the app and had stopped using it, but I checked as he was speaking, and it's been updated and it looks much nicer now, so hopefully it is already used. On the website, what sort of user experience things are you looking at? Are you looking at making sure it's friendly to use for mobile devices, for all the different devices? And yeah, sorry, that was it.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm picking up for the digital themes, which is this decision, is that's really important. So that's the endorsement for us going forward, the improvements in the website. That project is in a planning stage, so really early, so we can take that feedback forward. But clearly we will need to meet high design standards to make it appealing, otherwise no one will use it. For accessibility, we also need to think of things like Welsh language. And we have some challenges around the back office also, because sometimes we have really effective, apparent solutions, and then behind the scenes someone is needing to do something. So that's an inefficient method. So we have some work to do about tying the systems up, and all of those things will be part of this strategy going forward.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
My only other question is around the cost. Obviously, the cost of living is all going a bit mental at the moment, and how we, as the council, then support people's ability to actually access things. So I know we spoke earlier about public Wi-Fi and the ability to utilise that in some distinct areas of the city centre. Is there any view of how we can mitigate people's costs in their ability to access the data that they need to? It's a very silly question. Well, not a silly question. It's not a particularly direct question.
It's really relevant right now, the question.
Absolutely. In terms of that piece, so as we talked about, there were plans to reduce our expenditure on public Wi-Fi, which essentially have been reversed due to the kind of inclusion piece. So in a sense, that shows the importance of this, and the fact it's mentioned specifically in the strategy, I think, recognises that. And without the pandemic, we might have had a slightly different view as an organisation, but I think it's raised its importance. So in terms of the digital team, we have more work on that than we ever used to do, because again, that wasn't something we had the kind of capacity and resources to kind of deal with. So we're doing more of that from an organisational perspective. We're going to review the public Wi-Fi, and for instance, what we would aim to do is to to be able to reduce certain costs that maybe now enable us to maybe make it wider. We can't promise that's the case, but those are the kind of things we would like to do. As has been mentioned already, there are kind of funding opportunities for some of this kind of work as well. So where those opportunities arise, then we'd like to take advantage of those. So there are definitely challenges that we're looking at the possibility of a tablet loan scheme, sort of via the community hubs. So that's another initiative. That would be relatively small scale. You know, there's lots of initiatives that have gone on in terms of education, in terms of devices. So I think it's recognised important, and it's encouraging to hear you sort of mentioning the importance of that, which kind of hopefully sort of validates some of our thinking. But again, we welcome engagement with members in terms of, you know, any ideas and suggestions, and, you know, if some of these things need further funding, then obviously that would go into that kind of normal process.
As you were saying that, then I was just thinking, my brain was going off on one. Would it be possible, or would it be feasible, viable, to utilise some of the sort of district hubs as like a hotspot area, so it's not just the city centre? And then my brain went to, well, what we could do is we could try and drive some of the social behaviour, some of the youngsters, towards certain areas by offering that digital service as well. So maybe reduce some antisocial behaviour by pushing them or pulling them more towards areas where there's super fast broadband or there's super fast Wi-Fi, or like in the parks or the community centres, things like that.
I'll let Tracy talk about the aspect of the kind of the community behaviour type thing after I've kind of mentioned some stuff. So we provide public Wi-Fi in the city centre on buses, and we also provide it in 50 or so kind of sites, so council building, community centres, etc. So that is there. There was probably a place for us to do more publicity on that, especially given the new intake of members recently and the turnover of members there, and perhaps the awareness of that. So there's more we can do, I'm sure, in relation to publicising what we have and making people aware of that. So yes, again, going back to that, we'd like to save money to invest more. But again, feedback from members in terms of particular problems, particular areas, then very much, you know, we appreciate that kind of engagement as well.
Thanks, Mark. I think having it as an aspiration in the strategy, again, gives us an opportunity to go forwards with other partnerships. What does that look like? We've got a community safety partnership, say for Newport. Are there digital opportunities there? We've got things like the Gwent PSB. Are there digital opportunities there? And once we've set out our stall about what's important, doesn't quite give us permission, but it gives us a reason to engage on that basis. Our previous experience is interesting, actually, because there have occasionally been some issues where we've had requests to turn public Wi-Fi off to do with attracting groups of young people, antisocial behaviour, but actually these would be in the very areas that public Wi-Fi is really useful and important. And so there's something about, well, okay, what times do you have it on, and those sorts of things, and being sensible about that challenge and working in partnership. We haven't mentioned either, the bus Wi-Fi is a really interesting example of behavioural change, which came out of the same project as the city centre. So having free Wi-Fi on the buses, what we've seen is a much stronger engagement in our surveys and participation work as a consequence of people sat on those buses who might not ordinarily have access to digital means. So we know we've got a higher number of people who are older, who would be covered by the socio-economic duty, and in fact from minority communities on public transport, and more likely to engage with us, which is really important because we've picked up opinions we might not have otherwise had. But I have to say that was kind of an accidental opportunity, and it's about now realising that technology will give us access to other things and planning that in this strategy. So really important we get that in. Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Just another quick point, just to kind of give an indication of the sort of organisational commitment. So, for instance, bus Wi-Fi was funded by a kind of central government project previously. The costs aren't huge, but essentially as part of the additional funding, once that funding stream from central government kind of ended, it's now been kind of funded from core digital budgets. As I mentioned in the kind of digital report, the additional funding there has helped with things like this that otherwise might have been a budget pressure or a challenge, or some of these things we may have stopped doing. So you know, in that case, I think it's about £20,000 a year. But again, that's providing a service that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep. Councillor Davis?
I raised my hand, I think.
It's not showing me.
Is that not clear to you?
Councillor Davis first, and then you come in next, please.
Fair enough.
Thank you. One of the things I'd like to talk about is our older generation. Like we're saying about everything is changing and people are using the apps, and like Councillor Evans said, just to go to the tip, you need to go online. What about the inclusion of the older generation that doesn't have access to the internet or doesn't have access to mobile phones? All they've got to use is their house telephone. And what concerns me is perhaps we're leaving that generation behind, whereas we're finding now a lot of, there's a lot more of the older generation going forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So I hope that by including that skills and inclusion kind of theme, that we are kind of recognising that it is an important piece. It came through loud and clear in terms of the questionnaire feedback, that, and a little bit like Councillor Evans's comment around self-service, that there are lots of people who still want to use traditional channels, and there are sons and daughters of people, for instance, who will also say, my parents don't want to use this particular channel, and you need to maintain those kind of face-to-face and telephony services. So I think what we're trying to do in the strategy is, where people want to improve their skills, then we're trying to facilitate that, because you know, sometimes there's a bit of a fear factor and so forth, and also who's going to teach you how to do these things, for instance. So we want to increase people's opportunities for that. The inclusion piece in terms of things like public Wi-Fi, yes, that relies on people having a device, but that's trying to make it more available for them. So it came through loud and clear in the feedback from the questionnaire, and that's why it's part of one of the themes, and we totally can't forget about those people, because their opinion is just as valid as anybody else's. We're trying to encourage in the digital piece, but we can't force the digital piece. I think that's about the gist of it, really.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Al-Nawami? Sorry, Councillor Davis, have you finished?
Yes, I'm finished.
Can you turn your camera off, please, Councillor Davis? Councillor Davis, can you turn your camera off, please?
Put it off.
Yeah. If you finish, could you turn your camera off, please?
Is it?
Can we do anything with that? No, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do on our side. Do you want to try and come in then, Councillor Al-Nawami, and see where we go from there?
Yeah. Chair. Right. Yeah, I mean, just to be helpful, Chair, it's Al-Nawami, a lot softer than people try to pronounce it. It's basically pronounced as written. Okay. I wanted to come really on the presentation and the themes. I I have to congratulate the officers. It's very, it's a very bold set of themes. I really enjoyed the presentation. There's no harm in actually being, bold and aspirational, and I found them so. But of course, it's always, the challenge is being so bold and challenging, is going to require a lot of resources. And I would sort of praise our determination that we want to move from the paper document to something that is more tangible and more deliverable. And I'd like to see that. So if you look at theme 4, I mean, we see that, excellent connectivity in the city, broadband, Wi-Fi and mobile telecommunications, including 5G, very bold, excellent, but we are quite a long way away from that. So hopefully we can at least work on the Wi-Fi and making it more accessible to people, not just in the 50 buildings, but actually in the city centre itself or in the city itself. I don't know how much that will cost or how we will do it, but that's a way to including people in what we're trying to do here. I think the other thing is that I felt I needed to say is that while we are sort of looking at digital technology and technological means of delivering council services, it says that on that theme, council services are delivered by fast and reliable networks, smart city technology implemented. We must not forget, really, that our focus should be people. We're doing all that for people. We are really people servants in the council, and we should make it easy for people, therefore, to engage with us and contact us. And if technology can do that, efficiently and quickly and cheaply, and most importantly, in terms of saving sort of carbon footprint, it's all well and good, and that's what we should do. But what we must not forget is that there are those people, and it's been touched on by the various questioners, who are not able sometimes to engage through technology for various reasons. And we must not forget that, we need to provide an interface, face-to-face, people-to-people. There are many people who have told me that, they'd like to see someone to discuss their problem with. They don't find it very easy to actually do an email or ring them and having to wait really for their turn to come so that they can speak to someone who in the end can only say, well, I'll put you through to somebody else really. So yeah, great themes, but the emphasis should be on deliverability, and it also should contain, a means for people to contact us through other means rather than technology. I think that's important. And before I go, there was another theme where we're talking about collaboration. That was touched on in another organization I am a member of. So collaboration with whom, really, in terms of data collaboration? Who are we sort of looking at to collaborate in terms of data sharing? And how do we stand in terms of, in terms of the legality of that, in terms of privacy laws and so on? Thank you, ma'am.
If I maybe pick up on the last one in terms of data, we cover that in the annual information risk report, which I think we're planning to bring to this committee in September. But generally, in terms of data sharing, we talk about it in the data and collaboration, as you mentioned, and essentially data protection needn't be a barrier to sharing data. Sometimes we can share data that's not personal, in which case there's no kind of barriers there. Essentially, if there's a legal basis for sharing for things like safeguarding and so forth, then those things are absolutely fine to do. So data protection shouldn't be a barrier to appropriate data sharing. As I said, there's lots of data sharing that's happened during the pandemic that's happened appropriately, in that case to save lives, and that was kind of the basis for sharing data in certain circumstances like that. So data protection needn't be a problem. In terms of the kind of who we share data with, really anybody who's appropriate in that sense. So, if again going back to a kind of safeguarding example, if we're working with partners in terms of safeguarding hubs and so forth, then the appropriate level of detail needs to be shared with with those partners as necessary. And again, there's other legislation apart from the data protection that covers that. So there's that piece, and then there's the wider piece in terms of maybe some demographic data and trends and so forth. We haven't talked about them today, but the Newport Intelligence Hub has an important part in the organisation, and the role of that team and that function and everybody's investment in that, and as we talked about, evidence-based decision making. So they are in conversations with a number of partners in relation to sharing data with police and other organisations, anonymised type data, to give a better reflection of crime in the city and such like. Much of that happens as a kind of normal everyday activity, but I think there is more that we can do as well.
Okay, and in terms of the human interface,
I think we've talked about the need to provide those access channels of choice, and the need to improve people's digital skills where they wish to do so. So as I said, the surveys came through loud and clear. We can't forget about any particular demographic. We need to be inclusive, and where they want to, we can improve their digital skills. Where they don't want to, then we need to provide suitable alternatives.
Yeah, but I think we should do that always, shouldn't we, Mark?
Indeed.
Like the information. Yeah, I mean, the reason I mentioned that is that during the pandemic, when people couldn't have the face-to-face, in the information station and all that, lots of residents actually highlighted, that was a real handicap for them. That they could not deal with their, for example, getting permits for their car parking and that sort of thing. So I would, in as much as I said, really, I applaud the themes that you have put in that presentation and in the report, and really as good, challenging, aspirational. I think we should always provide a human channel for those who cannot engage for one reason or another with the technology that we are doing. I hope we agree on that one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen.
Well, I haven't had a response, Chair.
Well, I think it's probably outside
we nodded yes, absolutely.
It's outside their control, this one. You'd have to take this one up with Cabinet, I would imagine.
Where is the Cabinet member?
Well, they're not. Well, we talked about that earlier. You'll have to take it up in another forum, I think.
If I come back in, Chair, it's absolutely. We're consulting today on the digital themes, aren't we? That's the purpose of this discussion. And within the digital themes, it's really important that we make sure we're inclusive and we allow for human interface. And some of the themes actually talk about using technology in different ways to keep people in touch. We can pass on those comments about customer services, of course, but today we're talking about the digital themes, and I think the Councillor's comments absolutely accord with our intent there. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, that wasn't a criticism from me. I think the presentation was asking for feedback from members, was asking for engagement from members, that was an engagement I was providing.
I didn't think
That's
it was.
about, it isn't a criticism of what is happening now.
Thank you.
But I think there is a tendency, sorry Tracy, there is a tendency sometimes with technology taking over at the expense of the human interface, really. And what I'm saying, great to have all these things, and I look forward to seeing many of them implemented, especially to do with the Wi-Fi in the city, Wi-Fi connectivity in the city. But please let's not forget we are also dealing with people.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm sure we won't forget that one. Thank you, Councillor Al-Muhammad. Anybody else? Councillor Davis, you've still got your hand up. Is it legacy?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask with regards about social media and what is the contact like via Facebook and Twitter, etc. And also, is this such interactions monitored?
Thanks, Councillor. I guess we don't cover that explicitly in this digital strategy because for us that's more communications. But we have, in terms of our comms team, we use all social media and it's become more of a focus for us. Yes, contact is monitored, but often if you look at it yourself, you'll see us going back to residents to say, we suggest you get in touch on that matter because it's obviously an open forum, isn't it? And it's difficult to talk about individual queries. As part of the website work, there'll be some development of the interactions between the website and social media, and we're also working towards making our content more vibrant and designed, shall we say, for the social media world, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Right. We're going to see this substantially enacted with the permission of Cabinet before 2027. So can I assume that it'll come back to us again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So our intention is once we have a strategy, today you've seen an annual report on digital. Once we have a strategy, I suggest we merge the digital annual report to be also an update on the strategy. So you get an annual update on our progress on the strategy alongside our other digital work is our suggestion to the committee.
Thank you. And improved conductivity across the city, it's obviously something we'd all welcome, but I'd like to see a little more emphasis on the leverage this may give to new businesses setting up in the city and the general economic regeneration. You've touched on it in item 4, but you've not been specific. So if we could see more emphasis on the specific benefits to the city as a whole. We want to do the best by our customers, but to make our customers prosperous, we've got to make our city prosperous. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning. I think if everybody agrees, we can let Tracy and Mark go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Really useful feedback, and we're here to listen, and really helpful, all of the comments taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And if the members of the committee can just hang on, we'll look at our conclusions. Okay, summing up then, please. Do the annual report first.
Absolutely, we can go bit by bit if that's better for you, Chair. If I just go through the comments and recommendations got for the annual report first then. Obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like committee were quite happy with the report as it was.
You're on mute.
My apologies, sorry for that, Councillor. Just to go back on myself then. Felt like committee were happy with the report, the annual report as it was. Felt it was clear and comprehensive. There was a highlight on the importance of accessibility in the report. As a comment, I'll take back. But overall, quite important on the accessibility aspect, as well as the simplicity of systems. I've noted that Mark's mentioned he'll provide a summary of the surveys to members, and I'll speak with him about circulating that to you. And then if we look at the digital strategy, the main comments and recommendations I've got down relate to the importance of accessibility, again, in terms of face-to-face and telephony contact. So I'll definitely highlight all those points in my comments and recommendations that I take back to officers. But is there anything members want me to add, or anything I've missed?
Thank you, Samantha. On the city centre Wi-Fi, define the area that it actually covers. Yeah. Although, on the annual report, we've talked about externalising our data services, but the responsibility still lies with the council to protect their own information. So the necessity to audit or scrutinise our providers.
I also think it's important, Chair, just to recognise the huge transformation over the last couple of years of the services they've been providing, and I do think that's important to recognise under the circumstances how well they coped.
Mick-Dad? Mick-Dad, did you want to come in?
Yeah, come in, yeah. All right. Yeah, on the strategy, and I think they recognise it in the theme. I think we ought to, I feel we ought to highlight the importance of, providing a reliable Wi-Fi connection in the city centre, not just in the buildings.
It is in the city centre, McDad. It's not just in the buildings. You can walk around and use it.
I couldn't use it outside the buildings.
I can certainly raise it as a highlight of importance, but I think Mark did explain that it is accessible.
Yeah, and don't you think it's covered by asking them to define the areas of the city that it covers? Okay, yeah.
Can I come in? On the what's the first? Then on the annual digital report, I think it's perhaps quite important to get those data points I mentioned better defined. So the percentages of how many respondents for the customer satisfaction survey and what the averages are for the customer response times, because I feel I can't form an opinion based on a percentage if I don't know, is it 60% of 10,000 people or is it 100 people? So I think they did say that SRS would probably know.
Absolutely, I've made a note of the context being important, absolutely, with the data. Yeah, I've got all that noted down. Sorry, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Back to me then, I think, Chair, for the final item. It's just the action plan at the minute, still no forward work programme as of yet, but the draft work programme is, well, it's almost completed, if I'm honest with you. We are working with officers on it. looking at the action plan, it was only the one action from the previous meeting which has been completed, and obviously the actions from today I'll take forward for our next action plan. The date of the next meeting is the 9th of September. We've penciled in for the corporate plan on that date, as well as the strategic equalities annual report. Obviously penciled in, nothing 100% confirmed yet, but that's what we're working towards, just so committee know.
And that's a very full agenda. I think Matthew would agree that if we're going to deal with the corporate plan.
Corporate plan will be a big agenda, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will. So we might need to meet beforehand to...
Does the other one have to come to us in September?
I totally appreciate it. It's a big meeting, just as the corporate plan. Unfortunately, it does have to come to us then. From what I'm looking at the forward work programmes, it's going to be a busy few months, just because obviously we're straight after the election period. A lot of reports that are coming to us are in the 5-year cycles just being renewed or updated. So it's going to be, as I'm looking at the draft forward work programme at the minute, busy. We have tried to look at adding additional meetings, moving things around, but looking at how the meetings are at the minute, it's going to have to be a 2-item agenda. Obviously, it would be preferable not to be. I appreciate that. But as it is at the minute, it's looking like that's how it's going to have to be, unfortunately.
I don't think that's a problem, 2 items.
Okay. As long as we give due consideration to the corporate plan, that's the main thing. It's setting our agenda for the next 5 years.
Setting your agenda, Chair, for the next 5 years. Not mine.
Once it's adopted by Council, it'll be our agenda, Councillor Evans.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Thank you, officers. And I hope you can make some sense of our minutes.